Most people are asleep in the early hours of the morning. The streets are empty. The houses are quiet. And for a few short hours, it feels like the entire world has stopped moving. But for some people, that's when the strangest things happen. Unexplained footsteps in empty homes. Voices coming from rooms that should be silent. Dark figures standing where nobody should be. And encounters that still can't be explained years later. Whether it's coincidence, imagination, or something far more unsettling. Many of the most terrifying stories seem to happen between 3 and 4 in the morning. Tonight, you'll hear 4 disturbing stories from people who experienced something supernatural in the middle of the night. So lock your doors, turn off the lights, and enjoy these terrifying late-night horror stories. Story 1, The Figure at 3:17 a.m. I never used to believe there was anything special about 3 a.m. To me, it was just another hour of the night. That changed when I was 23. At the time, I lived alone in a small rental house outside town. It wasn't old or creepy. In fact, it was one of the nicest places I'd ever lived. For the first few months, nothing unusual happened. Then I started waking up at exactly 3:17 a.m. every night. At first I thought it was coincidence. Everyone wakes up randomly sometimes. But after nearly 2 weeks of waking up at the exact same time, it started bothering me. One night I decided to stay awake and see what happened. Around 3:10 a.m., I turned off my TV and sat in bed scrolling through my phone. The house was completely silent. 3:15, 3:16, then 3:17. The second the clock changed, I heard something move in the hallway. A slow creak, like someone shifting their weight on an old floorboard. I immediately looked toward my bedroom door. Nothing. Then another creak. Closer this time. The sound continued for several seconds. One step. Pause. Another step. Pause. Slowly approaching my room. I remember feeling my heartbeat in my throat. I lived alone. There shouldn't have been anyone in that hallway. Then the footsteps stopped directly outside my door. Complete silence followed. A full minute passed. Then the doorknob turned slightly. Not enough to open. Just enough to move. I stared at it without blinking. The handle slowly returned to its original position. Then silence again. Eventually I worked up the courage to check the hallway. Nothing. No intruder. No open windows. Nothing out of place. The next night, it happened again. Same time. Same footsteps. Same doorknob movement. This continued for nearly a month. Then one night I made a mistake. When the footsteps stopped outside my room, I opened the door immediately. The hallway was empty. But at the far end of the hallway, I saw a figure standing in the darkness. Tall. Completely black. No visible face. No visible features. Just a shape. Watching. The second I blinked, it was gone. I moved out 3 months later. The strange part? The nightly wake-ups stopped immediately. I've never woken up at 3:17 a.m. since. Story 2, The Voice in the Living Room. This happened when I was 16. My parents had gone away for the weekend, leaving me alone for one night. At first I loved it. Pizza. Video games. No rules. The perfect night. Around midnight I started watching horror movies. By 2:30 a.m., I was regretting that decision. The house suddenly felt much bigger than usual. Every room seemed darker. Every sound felt amplified. I eventually shut everything off and headed upstairs. Just as I reached the top step, I heard a woman speaking downstairs. Not loudly. Almost like a conversation. I froze immediately. The voice seemed to be coming from the living room. At first I assumed I'd accidentally left the TV on. That explanation lasted maybe 10 seconds. Because I realized something. The voice wasn't speaking English. I couldn't understand a single word. It sounded almost like whispering mixed with chanting. I slowly walked back downstairs. The voice stopped. Instantly. The living room was empty. The TV was off. The house was silent. I searched every room. Nothing. Eventually I convinced myself I had imagined it. I went back upstairs. 10 minutes later, it happened again. This time louder. The voice sounded irritated. Faster. More intense. Again I ran downstairs. Again everything stopped before I reached the room. This repeated 3 more times. The final time, I stayed hidden at the top of the staircase and listened. The voice continued for nearly a minute. I couldn't understand the words, but I could tell they were coming from a specific location. The corner of the living room. Not the TV. Not outside. The corner. Then another voice joined it. A deeper voice. Male. The 2 voices seemed to be speaking to each other. I called my father immediately. He stayed on the phone while I packed a bag and drove to my cousin's house. The following day, my grandmother heard the story. She became unusually serious. Then she asked the question. Was the corner near the old cabinet? It was. Apparently decades earlier, before my parents bought the house, an elderly woman had died in a chair beside that exact spot. Nobody had ever mentioned it before. I never spent another night alone in that house. Story 3. Something was walking on the roof. When I was 19, I worked night shifts at a gas station. Most nights I got home around 2 a.m. One morning, after an especially long shift, I collapsed into bed and fell asleep almost instantly. At 3:40 a.m., a loud thump woke me up. It sounded like something had landed on the roof. I assumed it was a tree branch. Then another thump happened. Then another. Slowly moving across the roof above my bedroom. Heavy. Deliberate. Not the sound of an animal. Not the sound of weather. Footsteps. I sat upright immediately. The sounds continued. Step. 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 Whatever it was moved directly above my bed. Then stopped. I remember staring at the ceiling waiting for another sound. Instead, I heard scratching. Long scratches dragging across the shingles. Back and forth. Back and forth. Then silence. I grabbed a flashlight and went outside. Nothing. No animal. No fallen branches. No footprints. The roof looked normal. The next night it happened again. Same time. Same footsteps. This continued for nearly a week. Then came the final night. Around 3:40 a.m., the footsteps returned. Only this time they didn't stop above my room. They moved toward the edge of the roof. Toward the front yard. I looked through the window and saw something climbing down. To this day I struggle to describe it. It looked human, but the way it moved wasn't. Its limbs seemed too long. Its movements too fast. Within seconds it disappeared into the darkness between houses. The footsteps never returned after that. But I still avoid looking at rooftops late at night. Story 4. The knocking below my bed. Out of every strange thing that's happened to me, this is the one I still can't explain. I was 27 and living in an apartment by myself. Nothing unusual had ever happened there before. One night I woke up around 3:08 a.m. No reason. No noise. Just awake. I checked my phone and tried falling back asleep. That's when I heard it. Knock. A single knock. Directly beneath my bed. I froze. A few seconds later. Knock. Same location. Same sound. As if someone underneath the bed had tapped the wooden frame. I slowly sat up. The room was dark. Silent. Then another knock. This time louder. Knock. I immediately turned on my bedside lamp. The knocking stopped. I waited. Nothing. After several minutes, I convinced myself it had been part of a dream. I switched the light off. The second darkness returned. Knock. Directly beneath me. I jumped out of bed instantly. The sound came again. Knock. 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 3 slow taps. I grabbed my phone flashlight and crouched beside the bed. I remember taking several deep breaths before finally looking underneath. Nothing. Absolutely nothing. No person. No animal. No object that could have caused the sound. I checked every inch. Empty. The moment I stood up. 3 knocks came from inside the mattress. Not under it. Inside it. I threw the mattress onto the floor and backed against the wall. The knocking continued. Slow. Steady. Impossible. Eventually it stopped on its own. The next morning I dragged the mattress outside and threw it away. I've never experienced anything like it again. But even now, years later, if I wake up in the middle of the night and hear a random sound near my bed, I immediately turn on the light. The strange thing about stories like these is how often they happen at the same time. The middle of the night. When everything is quiet. When most people are asleep. And when you're completely alone with your thoughts. Maybe there's a simple explanation for every story you've heard tonight. Or maybe there are some things that happen after midnight that we're simply not meant to understand. Either way, if you wake up suddenly at 3 a.m. tonight and hear footsteps in the hallway, or a knock coming from somewhere it shouldn't, you might not want to investigate. If you enjoyed tonight's stories, leave a like, subscribe, and let me know what horror theme you'd like to hear next. And remember, some nights are quieter than others. But sometimes, the silence is the scariest part. Good night.